Ain't going back, not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide, gonna let all the fears slide. Got mother nature, it's on my side. Got a whole of the loving.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the New Now. I'm delighted to be here with Jerry once again. We're doing Mind Monsters 8. I just want to remind everyone, newagora.ca. We've been in print for 13 years, fully online for the last 3. Tons of good information related to what Jerry's sharing, what Janine's about to share, ways you can help yourself to become a better person if you so decide to put that into action. And Jerry, welcome once again to our show. And yeah, please take it from here.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thanks for inviting us. I'm bringing Janine on with me today, whose son was taken over by the voices. He killed a number of people, and he was completely taken over by the voices. It was no longer him. Janine's going to tell her story, but I'm going to put a little background here first. Is kind of for those of you that don't know me, I'm going to briefly tell you. I mean, I've spent virtually more than a half century on the front lines of mental health. I've got 4 years of undergraduate school psychology, 4 years of graduate school in counseling and psychology. I've worked at the biggest psychiatric hospital on the planet. There were 10,000 patients there when I first got there. I was there for 7 years. Okay. That's where I began studying the voices. I was told in graduate school, like everybody is, that the establishment tells you that the voices are hallucinations due to one of several different things that they made up. Okay. Started studying the voices in Central State Hospital. And I saw they started running patterns. Of course, psychiatry and the educational system said they're hallucinations. So I believed that when I got there. Everybody else believed it when they got there. None of them were curious about what the voices were or how they operated. They believed they were hallucinations as they were taught in school. But I saw something very strange. It looked like the voices were driving the behavior of the patients on my caseload. And then I noticed that if psychiatry is saying that these things and the educational system are saying that the voices are hallucinations caused by a chemical imbalance, and that their drugs were somehow straightening out this chemical imbalance, I watched what psychiatry was doing. I worked with them shoulder to shoulder for half a century almost, and never did I see them give a baseline test to determine what chemicals in the brain were out of balance or by how much, ever. So how did they know it was a chemical imbalance if they didn't have a baseline and they didn't even know what chemicals they were dealing with in the brain? They have no idea. It was this chemical imbalance thing was made up by one of the drug companies. I believe it was Eli Lilly in the 70s when they came out with Prozac. They needed some excuse, some reason why their antipsychotic drugs and their antidepressant drugs worked, and they didn't have them. Oh yeah, there's something about serotonin, blocked the serotonin uptake, so there was more serotonin being pumped back into the nerve cells. But there was no chemical imbalance that wasn't caused by these drugs. So first they started off blaming it on mothers. Schizophrenia would do to mothers. The mothers did something, but people could see that. The public could see that. They could, mothers saw, hey, I didn't do anything. It was observable. So they had to move it out of the province of the explanation for schizophrenia, out of the province of what was observable to everyday staff, doctors, psychiatrists, counselors, psychologists, and move it out to where they couldn't verify this stuff for themselves. So they moved it into the genetic labs. Oh, it's a genetic abnormality. There's a genetic predisposition. They blamed it on the genes for who knows years. Finally, some honest geneticists said, we can't find a genetic marker. There is not one. And they finally debunked this genetic stuff. Okay. Then they moved up to the chemical imbalance stuff. All right. So I've been studying the voices that schizophrenics been hearing for over a half century now. They are not hallucinations, as the psychiatric mafia insists they are. Nor does the psychiatric mafia or the drug companies or any of them have any studies that they did on the voices, because they believe they're hallucinations. Who would study a hallucination? They had that pretty well covered.
Me.
You know? Yeah,
Oh
me
my
too.
goodness.
Me too. Right. So, they moved it up to the genetics, then they went to the chemical imbalance in the brain. That was debunked. So they really had nothing. But so they continue to this day to produce the chemical, push the chemical imbalance theory. If you go to their labs or their advertisements, it's like, oh, it is believed that there's a chemical imbalance in the brain. So they're still struggling to find an explanation for schizophrenia. They have no idea what causes it. None. They don't have a cure for it. They don't have a cure for any of the mental illnesses. None of those drugs cure anything. Nothing. All they do is they just it's like putting a Band-Aid on a festering sore. They don't cure anything. They're DSM, their diagnostic statistical manual, where they have all these diagnoses. I think there's something like 340 or something at this time. Every single one of those psychiatric diagnoses are made up. There's not a single test to verify any of them. There is no lab work. There is no EKG, EEG. There is nothing. No standardized scientific test that can verify any of their diagnoses. They cut up segments of normal behavior and they pathologized them with all these fancy psychiatric names, gave them a number so they could diagnose people to collect insurance payments. And then they teach this nonsense in schools. They make you virtually memorize that stuff. The whole mental health system, the whole Western mental health system is just a friggin' merry-go-round, a drug-fueled merry-go-round. They bring these psychotic people into the hospitals. They fill them full of drugs. They don't tell them about even a fraction of the toxic side effects that they'll be suffering from these drugs. They tell them about the major ones. They don't tell them that they rot out your brain. They rot out your nervous system with long-term use. They leave that out. So these people are released from the hospital. Okay, these drugs are major tranquilizers. They calm them down. They're able to get their wits about them again for a short period of time until they're sick of taking them. Then they go off them. Sometimes they think it's like taking an antibiotic. You take the antibiotic, it knocks out the infection's gone. It doesn't work that way with this stuff. You have to stay on those drugs. You have to stay medicated. It's not the way to treat schizophrenia for the normal person. I mean, all it does is suppress the symptoms of schizophrenia. It doesn't cure anything. It doesn't get rid of them. Even while they're on these drugs, they're still hearing the voices. Most of them are. So it's not solving anything. It's just controlling these people. They're not even looking for an answer because they reduced the funding. NIMH has reduced the funding to a dribble for research into schizophrenia. And then they played with the numbers. I think there was like 1.5 million schizophrenics in the US or something like that. They tampered with the numbers by ruling out all these classes like homeless people and people in homes. And they cut out a vast majority of the population, made it look as if it wasn't a big problem. But look on the streets in the big cities. Most of those homeless guys are people that belong in mental hospitals. They're hearing voices. They're mentally unstable, right? So that they defunded the mental health, the state hospitals, and they said, "Oh, we're going to treat these people in the community," expecting them to come to line up at the mental health centers and travel whatever distance they had to travel to go take these drugs when they wouldn't even take them in the state hospital when they were handed to them. They would take them, they would stick them under their cheeks, they'd spit them out in trash cans. Non-compliance with those medications was a huge problem because they were so toxic. They had awful side effects. So even when they're being handed these medications, they weren't taking them. As though they expected these people to show up in mental health centers, keep their appointments when, they're hearing voices, they're half psychotic, they can't keep things together, and they're supposed to arrange their transportation to a mental health center, wait in a long line along with a bunch of other people that make them nervous for a psychiatrist to see them for 20 minutes and prescribe them some of these toxic drugs. It isn't happening. These people are staying on the streets. They're committing crimes. They're robbing places. They're trying to survive out there. Our mental health system, our Western mental health system, is a friggin' drug-fueled joke. It's disgusting. It's money and power. Money and power. And heaven forbid, if I was employed, I'd be fired tomorrow.
All right. Well, thank you, Jerry. Maybe this is a good segue into Janine's story as to her experience in said system with her son. Hey, Janine, how's it going?
So while I was in there, I saw several patients were taken over by these voices, especially the criminally insane in the prisons. They committed crimes. They were no longer the person that their family thought they were. They became very dangerous, and lots of times they hurt their families. So that's why I wanted Janine to speak, because you may think, oh, this is my son, this is my daughter, they're threatening me, that's a harmless threat, they wouldn't hurt me. No. I'll turn it over to Janine. She'll tell you, the true story there.
Hi. So I think where I would like to start is when Donovan was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Donovan's your son, I'm guessing.
Yeah, okay. His name is Donovan. And Donovan was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was 12. And how that came about was I was married at the time to another man, and not his biological father. And my two younger boys, we started noticing bruises on them. Okay, and this was in the 80s, in the early 90s, mid 80s, late 80s to early 90s. And so what happened was we started noticing bruises on the children. And my youngest son, I'm not going to say their names. My youngest son, he was about 18 months old, and we were concerned, and him, especially my husband then, and my middle son was complaining that Donovan was trying to suffocate him. So he hid a video camera and turned it on, and sure enough, Donovan took a pillow and put it over my middle son's face on the couch and tried to suffocate him. And sure enough, my younger son, Donovan, was taking a basketball and bouncing it off of his head. And he was about 18 months. And, if you're a father, that they have a soft spot, on their head. And that was just it. When I saw these videos, I just, I completely lost it. So we decided that we wanted to get Donovan psychoanalyzed, and so we did. And what ended up happening through the psychoanalyst, by a psychologist and a psychiatrist, they decided that it was going to be in Donovan's highest and best good to put him in the state hospital in Colorado. So they put him in the state hospital, and that's when he was officially diagnosed with schizophrenia. And through that is when I discovered through the doctors that were there that Donovan had been sexually abused by one of my boyfriends when he was young, when he was 4, and I didn't know about it. Now, a lot of people ask me, how could you not know that? I didn't know. I worked a lot, and I trusted my boyfriend to take care of Donovan when I was working. I was probably 19 years old or 20 years old at the time. I was a young mother. I had Donovan when I was 16 years old. And these are things as a mother, a young mother, that you're naive. I was naive. I had no idea. When we decided that we were going to go ahead and allow the doctors to do what they were going to do, and it was medicate. So Donovan was in a state hospital for a while, And when he came back, and there were times when he had episodes, and episodes to them are having a schizophrenia episode where the voices are talking, and he was put in a straitjacket. And, we stayed in touch with them and visited with, him during visitation times at the state hospital, but it didn't solve the problem, hindsight being 2020, looking back on everything. So when Donovan got out of the state hospital, he was on 3 or 4 different kinds of medicines. One of them was Thorazine. And then they put him on Prozac, and he was on Risperdal and some other medications. And anger meds too. But I don't remember some of the names of those. It's been so many years ago. Donovan's going to be 46, or is going to be 46 soon. His birthday's on the 24th of this month. So what happened was, all of these, meds he was taking, it seemed to work. And back then, because I didn't know any better, I felt that the medications were doing some good. Then there was a point in time when Donovan was about 15, 16 years old, after he had his change of voice and everything, he came to me, and he had to go see the doctor on a regular basis, okay, a psychiatrist and a psychologist over time. And I homeschooled him, by the way. I did have him in a public school, but it just didn't work out. And I put him in Civil Air Patrol, and he learned how to fly an airplane before he knew how to drive a car. He still is very hugely intelligent, to be honest with you. But there was just a disconnect, from a psychological perspective. So time passed, and I remember we were sitting one day. I was also a college student. We were all going to college. Donovan graduated from high school very early, homeschooling. We were all going to college at the time in Denver. And his stepdad, my husband, then was studying to be a doctor. I was going to school to become a psychologist, and Donovan was going to school to be a lawyer. He was studying English, getting an English major, and we were all in college at the same time. It was pretty cool then. And I remember him and I coming home, from school and from college, and saying, "Mom, this medicine, I just can't function. I can't think. It's making me drowsy. I fall asleep during classes, and I just can't function." And he said, "Please, can I stop taking these meds?" And my heart as a mom, but also we have to remember, as moms, we're enabling, to a degree. And I said, "Donovan, I know I've been watching you and observing you, and I know you're not yourself." He was lethargic. It was not a good thing. And so I agreed for him to come off the medicine, and he was okay for a while. And then there were some periods of time when he got violent again, and he would have these outbreaks of just violence and yelling and screaming, and the voices would just come, and he would be okay for maybe 5 or 6 months, and then he would just have these these episodic breaks where his feelings were changing drastically, like at the drop of a dime. And he was scary when he was like that.
When did you first realize that these were voices that were acting on him and not just some kind of crazy psychosis?
Well, that's a good question, Jerry. When he was about 4 or 5 years old, he used to have playmates. And he had 3 of them. And I'm not going to tell you the names, because I'm not going to conjure up any spirits here. That's not my job. But he had 3 friends, and he was about 4 or 5 years old. And they stayed with him for a while, really, even past 12.
You mean
imaginary friends did?
You mean imaginary friends? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Were they nasty?
No, these were not. They were just.
So when did you first realize?
But they weren't nasty. They were just. They were with him all the time. There were 3 of them.
Okay.
Really?
When did you first realize that there were voices involved with what was going on?
When he was very young. Very young.
He was hearing voices then?
Yeah, they talked to him. He was having conversations with them. And, you know, and there wasn't any person in the room. You know, and all kids talk to themselves. All kids have an imagination.
Yeah, but then it started
And
turning dark at some point.
yes, it did. And that was around the 12-year-old puberty age. By the time he reached the age of 15, 16 years old, these voices were no longer with him, and there was just one major darkness about him. And I asked him years later, I said, when did those, and you know, when did those three people leave you? When did they leave you? And he said, oh, I let them go a long time ago. And this larger, massive darkness, you know, attachment came into him. And it was, honestly, it was when he was 17. And it was an ugly situation. I had to kick him out of the house. He got very violent with me, and he, you know, would yell. And Donovan is like 5'9" and very long arms, longer than his knees. He has a span of like 6'3" when it goes arm to arm. And there's some weird thing with that, and I don't know all the medical terminology. But what I can tell you,
do you know he was hearing voices at that time?
yes. Oh,
how did you know?
Because of the way he was acting. He would go into his own little world. And I can't say little because darkness is very big. He would go into his own little world. He would just walk around. He would talk to himself. He would have episodes. He would have anger episodes with me. Okay. When no one else was around, he would raise his voice with me. He would be intimidating. He would be bullish. He would come at me, you know, he would, you know, do these things. And I would tell him, Donovan, you need to stop. I said, who are you? I want you back. And this is, of course, over time. A lot of this stuff that happened, he never did around his stepdad. He never did around his two brothers. It was between him and me. Okay. I was a safety net for him, a safe zone for him to be absolutely expressive. But over the course of time, dealing with his schizophrenia and his outbreaks and his anger, I had to learn skill sets to not allow him to intimidate me, because that force of energy that entity had on him, when I started realizing this was just more than schizophrenia, that there was something more going on, and I knew the meds wasn't helping, and I even started questioning the doctors, but they said no, he has a chemical imbalance. They said he had a chemical imbalance in Pueblo, but they never presented any medical records of any testing that they allegedly were supposed to do to come up with that. I can tell you that from my own personal experience. Nothing like that came about. It never, it just didn't. So I know that to be true. And so for me as a mom, over time, because we kind of grew up together, I was a 16-year-old mom. So there's a lot of brothers and sisters that have that age gap. And for a long, long time, Donovan called me Janine. He didn't call me mom, because we had like a sibling relationship. So we kind of like were friends, but not like a mother-son friendship. And it was really difficult for me, because I said, you need to stop calling me Janine. You've got to call me mom. I'm your mother. I'm not just Janine. I am your mom. And that took some time. Like when I was 22 years old is when he started calling me mom, because I put my foot down. I said, I've had enough. So in that period of time after he turned 17, now he's got these voices going on. Okay. And the violence and the things and hurting animals. He started acting out with animals. He started take cats and abusing cats and doing awful things.
That's a sure sign that something's going wrong there. You know? Now, did he ever admit to you that he was hearing voices, or did you overhear some of his conversations? Did he ever tell you what they said?
Um, he would just have discussions. He would just talk. There was a conversation, but there was nobody present. And he would, if I said, Donovan, who are you talking to? It would be like, no, never mind. Never mind. Because he was caught, because you have to understand something. When a person's in that state of mind, for any mom who's out there who's experienced this, or even a family member, when they're in that state of mind, everything around them is non-existent, because that voice that's talking to them moves the outer world away from them, and they have no concept of what's going on around them. It doesn't matter whether you're cooking dinner. It doesn't matter what's going on. They're in their own world, and you have to break that that silence through something like getting in their face. Hey, whoops, I'm so sorry. I knocked my, I'm so, okay. So when you're in that space, and I apologize for that. When you're in that space with your kid, or anybody, any family member that has schizophrenia, you have to get in their face. You have to get in their face. You have to get their attention to break that cycle of voices.
Well, they're sucked into their own world.
They are, very much so. And this was, and I will tell you, my entire life being a mother to this child of mine, I love, even to this day, with everything that's happened, with all of the ugliness that Donovan has done, I still love him as a mother. People ask me all the time, how can you love your child after you know what he's done? I'm his mother. I raised him. I gave birth to him. It's an ugly situation, but here's the thing. Love heals. You have to love your children no matter what. And he knows I love him. And the thing is that was where I was at. I had to love him to get him to pay attention to me as his mother, to let him know, look, Donovan, I know you're having a bad day. I know whatever's going on in your head, not even fully understanding schizophrenia at that time either. It's been an ongoing life lesson for me.
Now, could you feel him getting deeper and deeper into it as time went on?
Well, after he was 17 and he did that, he went to hit me and he hit the wall and put a hole in the wall. And I had to remove him, and he dropped out of college, and it was just, he wasn't going to university anymore. And it was just awful. And I couldn't have him at home. He started dealing drugs out of the house, and he started doing meth. And I said, I can't have you here. I can't have you here. You can't be doing this in my home. This is my home. This is not your home. You don't have permission to do that. He was at the age of 17, and I booted him out. I said, you have two choices. I said, you can, number one, go back to school. You can get a job, or you have to move out if you're not going to go back to school. There's no other ultimatum. That's it. That's the only options you have. And that's when he came at me, and he came at me at this side, and he just kind of took his fist and went through the wall. And I knew then that I would be in trouble if he wasn't out, because the violence would increase. And it just got worse and worse after that. And the drugs, when he was on the meth at 17, it changed his personality. It changed his dynamic. It changed everything about him. And I had my other two kids. I was going through an ugly divorce, but there was a lot of things going on. I could not deal with that side of him, and I had to separate myself with hard love.
Yeah. Meth is like
letting
dumping,
him know
meth is like dumping gasoline on the fire. I mean, it just opens people up to these entities, and they just swarm on in there. And if they're already there, it makes them worse.
And that's what I noticed, that at that moment of time, because I was afraid, I realized that there was more to this darkness that he was sinking into that was even worse. And, if I said to him, Donovan, are you on your meds? Because even when he was 17 years old, I was still pro-pharma, sort of. I was coming out of it, but I was still, I was coming down. It's like, these medicines aren't working, but I was still pro-pharma to a degree.
Yeah, there's no other option,
I didn't understand it all. No.
No. Back then, there
So
was no other option. Today, there is. Back then, there
Mhm.
wasn't. They had everybody
Mhm.
brainwashed. This is a chemical imbalance. There's nothing you can do about it except take these meds. It's a life sentence. And they would even tell their patients that. It's far from true.
No other medical option.
Mhm.
Always personal
Mhm.
options. Yeah.
Mm.
Mhm. So when he left, he ended up going to live on the streets, and and he was like that for a year. He started stealing cars. He started working in chop shops. He got arrested. He got put in jail in Green River, Wyoming for a while. He came back. He got back on the meds 2 weeks after he was out of jail. They gave him a handful of meds, and he never went back. He was never the same. He was never the same. And it got progressively worse. And then there were just things that he would do. He would call me in the middle of the night and he would be crying and would say, "Mom, I just need you to stay on the phone with me." And then we ended up having phone call conversations. And then he was in and out of jail from that point forward. It never stopped. And he was experimenting with meth and crack cocaine. And it was awful. It was awful. And then I'm trying to go to college to get myself in alignment. And I can promise you, with all the stress, that everything that was going on in that, everything about my life as a mom was upside down, because I had to take my time and focus on him. And I'm not saying it was a bad thing, but Donovan did need me. But at the same time, it was so much. It was so much. It was so much. I even look back today, even after all I've gone through since 2020. I don't even know. Honestly, I think maybe it was just because I was younger, but I don't even know how I got through of all of it, to be honest with you, because I had to go to get therapy myself, just to be able to learn new coping skills with the schizophrenia and the violence that Donovan, was ensuing. And he would come to my college classes and he would barge into my university classes. It was embarrassing. It was horrible. And, these are the kinds of things that I had to deal with over time after he left home. So that's kind of where that went at that particular time.
Okay, I remember you showing a video of him getting violent. Do you still have that or no?
I do. However, I don't have access to it yet. But when we do another interview, we can, I will be more than glad to share that with you. Yeah. So in 2017, Donovan came to live with me in Arizona from Denver for 6 months, from July 6th to November 6th. And Donovan allegedly was out of trouble. He had gotten out of jail, and his probation officer at that time said that it would be good for him to consider moving out of state. Why don't you go see if you can, stay with your mom? And he came and lived with me.
Why was he in jail? Why was he in jail at the time?
Abuse, stealing. A lot of it had to do with the girlfriend he murdered. They were constantly fighting. She became a heroin addict, and she enticed him to do things. And they had a child, and he got taken away from them and their son. And they wanted me to take custody. And some people may or may not agree with them. I don't really care. I could not do it, because the truth of the matter is I knew that if I took custody of my grandson, they would come always to my house, and my life would still be again upset, especially with the drug use. I wanted to, but he did go to his great grandfather, and they had aunts and uncles that took really and are taking really good care of him. But I had to make hard decisions that I didn't want to have to make. I didn't want to have to make those choices, but I knew my son well enough to know he could go on a flim flam that quick, be from Denver to Arizona with his girlfriend, and it would just be chaos. And that child deserved a better life than that. I just didn't want to participate in that.
Now he killed some people before that, didn't he?
Yeah. So in 2000, in the end of 2019, 2000, he was heavily involved in meth. He had been stealing cars. He had been buying and selling guns, and he robbed me. He robbed my house, and he took my safe, a 350-pound fireproof safe drug it upstairs by himself, took it, broke it open, and took all my saved money and guns that I had in there. And he sold, I had handguns, and he sold those, and then he got them back. And then there was a gunfight on a drug deal that was in Aurora, and there was gunfire in in the middle of the night between him and these other drug dealers that were in Aurora. And come to find out, when it was all said and done, 4 people got killed with loose gunfire, and one person that was part of the other people that were shooting at him got shot. But 3 families suffered at the hands of my son's gunfire, because when all the autopsies were done and everything, the bullets came from the 357 Magnum that I owned, and it was his bullets that shot and killed those people while they were sleeping or sitting in their living room. And there were 3 people that died at the hands innocently. And when he was arrested in Aurora for the murders, for the killings, he was so out of it on methamphetamines that they had to put him in the state hospital because he wasn't competent to go to trial. And so then what ended up happening was he was in the state hospital for about 8 years over that. And then when the funding was running out in Colorado for schizophrenia, for schizophrenics in the state hospital, they decided to give him a competency test, and he proved to be competent. And then he went to trial, and then he went to prison for another 7 more years on 4 counts of second-degree manslaughter.
Janine, may I ask, like, why originally did you pick up the 357?
Because in Colorado and living in Denver and being a single mom, I took gun classes and had a permit to carry, but I kept the gun in the safe. And I kept the bullets in a different location. I just I felt safer, but there was a time when I didn't have to have the gun. I just put it in the safe. So this was early on when I was a single mom and I felt like I needed to have a gun, but I never ever kept the gun around my son. I can't say that for my second husband because they fired guns a lot. I lived on a ranch in Cripple Creek, Colorado. And, guns were just a part of, our lives, being, farmers and having chicken farm and a sheep farm and all that stuff. So I'm just saying it wasn't abnormal to have a gun, but,
so
that
Janine,
was
you throughout this, you probably felt your son slipping away from you, the person you knew, and a lot of times, what I've seen with the criminally insane people I worked with, they didn't remember doing the crime they did. And a lot of them would say, the voices told me to do it. And the judge will go, you're crazy. There is no voices. We're going to lock you up. I don't know how many, even Ted Bundy talked about the voices that drove him to commit the murders he did there. But what did you feel as you could, that link, that motherly link you had with your son began slipping away? What was that like as this dark force began taking him over?
That day that he threw his fist through the wall when he was 17, and I knew that there was a much stronger force behind it that was a very evil force. I didn't understand it a lot at that time. I really did feel he was possessed. I didn't understand it then as I do now over the course of time, from then and, being with him all these years as an adult son at that point. After that, he came back when he came back to his senses when he married his wife. You have to remember, my son was married at the time. He was with his girlfriend. He was pregnant for a while, so he's never divorced his wife while he lived with the girl that he murdered. His wife and he had a daughter together, which is my oldest granddaughter. She's 23, 24. And
so this wasn't his first girlfriend. This wasn't his first girlfriend that he ended up killing, I guess. This was another lady.
Yeah, this was his girlfriend after he got out of prison in 2007. And so they had a daughter together and they lived with me, and he was really good. And I was married to my third husband then, Ray, who was Japanese. And he loved Ray. Ray loved him. And Ray knew he had schizophrenia. And his wife and he lived with us while she was pregnant. And so after the baby was born, after my granddaughter was born, they were living with us. And then one night we woke up, or one day we woke up in the middle of the day, and they had been with us. My granddaughter was 3 months old at the time. They just moved out in the quiet of the night. They just moved out. And then as time passed, within a month after they moved out, his wife and my granddaughter and he moved out, he was back on meth. She was stripping in a strip club on Colfax Avenue, which is a street where there was a lot of prostitution back in those days. And my granddaughter got taken away by the state and ended up in foster care at 3 months old, and then ended up being adopted out to another family.
So what was it like after you met him again, after all this happened? After all this happened, when you met him the next time?
Okay.
What were you feeling after that? After the first time you met him, after that happened? He moved out.
Yep. So after he got out of prison in 2007, he wanted to kill me. He told the district attorney he was blatant. He was on a rampage. I didn't see him again until, my goodness, 2015 was the first time I saw him after everything was done. And he came and brought his son to Colorado and hung out for about 2 weeks. And Donovan then, he wore a hoodie and he was gangster all the way. He was bald. He had the swastikas all over his body. And he looked at me. I said, he said, "Mom, I need you to quit telling me what a good kid I am and how smart I am. I am not a good person. I do bad things to people." He said, "You need to stop telling me what a good kid I am and talk to me about all my skill sets and all this stuff. I'm not a good person." And he took his hoodie and he threw it up over his head. His eyes got very black. He had a hoodie on. He crossed his legs. He had a pair of blue jeans on and a pair of black, army boots. And he just sunk into this place of darkness. And I knew then I was not dealing. I knew then I lost my son. I knew at that moment that whatever was occupying my son was very real and very ugly and very, very dark. I didn't still at that time understand completely, but I can tell you that's when I knew I had lost him.
Was this after he had his 3-year-old daughter and was taken away? This moment
yes.
you just mentioned? Okay.
Yes. Years later. Yeah, she was out of his life at that point. He was with the girlfriend he was with. And there were years that went by that he even thought that this son that he had wasn't his, because she was doing drugs, smoking meth, and he tried to get away from her, and he would leave her and he would go into therapy and he would get back on the meds, and then he'd get in trouble and he ended up in jail and when I say trouble, the in and out of jail part, the question that you asked me, which I haven't gotten to, and I apologize for that. They fought all the time, and their fighting was so violent with each other. It was so violent, bloody noses, broken fingers, cuts, knives, fighting kind of thing. The police would be called by the neighbors, and then domestic violence would come, and one of them would get thrown in jail, and it was usually Donovan because of his record. I mean, he had a history of violence, and he would be in jail for 6 or 7 months, plead guilty, get out on probation, get drunk, get high, do the same thing all over again. It was just a vicious cycle over and over and over and over again with the violence and the voices and, telling him what he needed to do to her and all. And she didn't help any either. I'm sorry, to say this, she didn't deserve to die the way that she did, but she was also an instigator to a degree of also to him with the drugs, because she enticed him to come back to her so
Now,
they could do drugs together.
Did Donovan at any time tell you about what the voices were telling him? Or did he keep that to himself?
Not really, because I learned more from his poetry through the voices and the monsters than I did with him telling me what they said. I just could tell when his eye color would change. You have to understand, my son has the brightest green eyes, beautiful green eyes, and they would go pitch black, pitch black.
Wow.
His soul, even in his mugshots, when he was arrested in Globe, Arizona, when he came down here from Denver after he murdered his girlfriend, he had her body for 43 days, parts of her, I should say. And even when he came down here, when you look at his mugshots, he's just demonic. His soul is gone. There is nothing about my son in that human body of his, about his soul, that I knew that even existed at that point in time. Yeah, it was awful to deal with.
You couldn't see any vestige of your son in there at all?
No, absolutely
completely
nothing.
changed, different person.
Oh, yeah. He was not the same ever. And of course he's not now either. Yeah, and watching that unfold over the course of time as the entity got stronger and stronger and stronger over time. And then I knew there was a point in time that he was definitely possessed with a demon or a parasite of some sort. I didn't understand the whole thing, which is why I reached out to you, because that's why I resonated so much with Sherry Sweeney when I first heard her interview with Robert Phoenix, the astrologer, and that's how I came to know you. I swear to you, I knew at that moment, oh my gosh, these people are onto something. This is exactly what I've gone through. I know this to be true. I know that he and still does to this day, this entity. And here's the thing, even if with him in prison, this entity has not left him. And even in all the times that he's been in prison, as a matter of fact, I think it grows stronger in some ways, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it grows stronger in there. So leading up to the murder of his girlfriend, I mean, what were you noticing immediately prior to that? And then how did it unravel from there?
So in 2019, he just disappeared. So I didn't know where he was.
So he had a wife at the time and the previous girlfriend, and he was still married to his wife, and then he disappeared around that time. From your life,
he just disappeared. When I sent him back to Colorado in 2017, we never saw each other again. That I was done. I never saw him again until he showed up at my front gate on June 5th, the day 43 days after he murdered Allie. And I knew he was there. He wasn't there to say hello and wrap his loving arms around me. He was there to kill me. He was on a rampage. He even tried to kill his own daughter. And so with that being said, yes, his wife was living in Colorado at the time that this whole thing took place. She left and went to another state, Oklahoma, I believe. And then of course, Allie's out of the picture because she's been murdered. And so I hadn't seen him since 2017. So what happened was, where he disappeared was he got put in jail for abuse. He tried to kill Allie again. As she stabbed him, he stabbed her. They cut each other up.
So he still had a relationship. He had a relationship with his ex-girlfriend while he was married with his wife. Is this when this was?
For years. And yeah, for years. It just went on and on. Yeah, it was toxic. It just never ended.
So in that video you showed, he showed up and and you told him to leave. Was that when that wasn't when he showed up at your house? that last time.
Oh,
right?
no. That was in 2017. So yes, let's go back and readdress that, because I did get off track. I digressed, and I apologize again, because sometimes it's hard not to, these memories start flooding up and it's hard not to, speak about them. So to answer your question about the video, Donovan was doing okay. And then about a week before November 6th came about, and I told him he had to get a bus and leave. I could not have him in the house anymore. This demonic energy, and I call it demonic because it is truly dark and evil and violent and powerful and strong and scary and just very scary. It came about, and you've seen the video, Jerry. He just turns into this screaming, blaming. It's all your fault that I turned out the way that I am. I hate you. You're, F and B. You're an F and C. You're an F and this and that and the other. And he's just, I hate you. And he's got this, the voice that comes out of his vocal cords is guttural. It's deep. It's, and he's flailing in his arms, and he's just really, his anger. And it happens at the drop of a dime. Whatever feeling, the thing is that feeling of what happens is the entity that it lives within him, it can remain in a place of stagnant energy for a while, maybe 6 months or maybe less. Usually about 6 months is the going, I'd say, time frame. But we don't know. I don't know what that voice says to him to make him come out of that place. I don't know what that voice is doing to change his feelings. I can tell you that if he has any semblance of confidence, or because I was trying to fluff him up and I was trying to get him confident in himself to do good things and get a good job if he went back to Colorado, and got him some nice clothes and got him some nice shoes and got him, feeling good about himself. When his confidence level got up, then you would start seeing his demeanor change. He started feeling depressed. He wasn't on meds the whole time he was there in 2017. And then about a week right before, 3 or 4 days before November 6th, he just started getting outraged, and he was angry, and he would walk around stomping his feet. And
okay, when you keep referring to November 6th over and over, what happened? Was that when he killed Allie on November 6th?
No, November 6th was the day that I took him to the bus station and said, you can never come back. I don't want you in my home ever again. You cannot come back, because it got violent with me. He didn't hurt me. I locked him out of the house, and I made him sleep outside because I was petrified. I told my roommate, I said, you can't allow him in this house. We have to figure out a way to get him to the bus station. And then at that night, after he calmed down and it was really cold outside, and he was whining and, walking around the house and banging on the walls, let me in. I said, there's no way I'm letting you in. You will not come in, because here's the thing. When he gets like that and he gets violent, I do not know whether or not he's going to remember what he does, but I can tell you that whatever happens, he will get violent, and he gets violent very quickly, and he will hurt you. He will hurt me. He will hurt anybody. He will hurt any animal. He will hurt anything that's in that pathway. The possession will come in, and he just got extremely violent. And I didn't want him around me. I had to preserve my life in order to figure out how am I going to get this kid out of my house now, because this is not, I can't deal with this.
And that's when you took that video and he was stomping around, and you told him to leave.
Yeah.
Okay. And then fast forward, how you didn't see him since that time, right?
No, not until June 6th of 2020.
And that was after
he murdered.
Okay. After he murdered his girlfriend, but you didn't know that at the time, or when did you know about the murder? How did you find out about that?
Well, okay. This goes back to the mom thing. So on the 23rd of April, and today's the 19th. So April is a very difficult month for me, everyone. I need you to understand this. It's been a very difficult month for me. It always is. And it's like it happened yesterday. On the 23rd of April, I called the Arvada Police Department, and I asked them to do a wellness check, because I hadn't heard from Donovan in a couple of weeks, but I had this voice And I this intuition, it's not necessarily a voice. I had this intuition. My gut was saying something's wrong. Something's very, very wrong. So I called the Arvada Police Department. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening, Tucson, Arizona time. It was like about 9 o'clock in Colorado. And I called the Arvada Police Department and I requested, now keep in mind, COVID is in full force. Everybody is in lockdown. Nobody's going anywhere. Nobody knows how to navigate the waters of the sea we are all floating in. I called the Arvada Police Department and I asked for a wellness check. So allegedly, according to the return phone call that I got, because I ended up going back to bed, I gave them the address of the known address where I believed Allie to live at that particular time, which was not the right address. It was based on an arrest record in January of 2020. And that's all I had. But they had her current address, but they didn't go there. And what happened was they went to the old apartment. The people weren't there. And then they called back and said, you know, we're sorry, you're just probably just a worried mom. I'll still have the recording to this day from the Arvada Police Department. We went to go check, and the two people there, that wasn't them. They're probably just hunkering down because of COVID. So we're just going to let this go. And I knew in my gut something was very, very, very wrong. I don't know. I can't identify it, but moms know these things. Any mom knows when there's something wrong with their kids, even if they don't see them for a long, long time. And so then on the 24th of April was Donovan's birthday. And so I went on Marco Polo, because at the time I didn't have an iPhone and I had an Android, and I sang him happy birthday. But he had deleted Marco Polo, because you can tell when, and he didn't pick it up for the next day. 25th went by. The morning of the 26th, which was a Sunday, I was hiking with a girlfriend at 5 o'clock in the morning. We went hiking, and he called me at 5 o'clock. And when he called me, usually when he was with Allie, because I knew he was with Allie at this time, because he finally admitted that he had moved back in with her. I made him tell me the truth. I said, because I told him, I said, if you're with her again, I am not going to have anything to do with you. I'm done with you. You guys are going to end up killing each other. Everybody knows it. His probation officer knew it. He even had a restraining order. She had a restraining order against him not to even have contact. And the Arvada Golden probation department didn't even act upon it because of COVID, because they didn't know how to deal with it. Isn't that nuts? He had an active restraining order and he still was able to move in with her. And that's when he killed her. So as that goes on, it was a very, very stressful time, because
how did you find out?
So on the 27th, so on the 26th, when I was hiking, he always called me during my hike and he would bother me. I said, Donovan, you know I'm hiking. He said, Mom, I just want to let you know that I'm at peace. Allie and I made peace with each other. And I said, well, that's good. I'm glad you were able to talk it through and you guys are doing okay. Because sometimes I have to pacify him to get him to talk to me. And he said, yeah. He said, you know, she even left her phone here with me. This is what he said to me on the phone call. She even left her phone with me. And he said, she trusts me that much. And I said, and then a red flag kind of went off, but I let it go, because I told him, I said, why don't we talk about this later? I have to go. And he said, well, I just want you to know that we've made peace and everything's good. And I said, well, that's good. I need to go. Don't call me again. I'm going hiking. So you quit interrupting me, because that's kind of the way it is with Donovan. He would just call me at the most obtuse times. Then the 27th happened, and that was a Monday. And he called me at about 10 o'clock in the morning. I was sitting at my table having coffee. I was studying, doing some reading. And Donovan said to me about 15 minutes into the conversation, Mom, I've got something I have to tell you. And I said, okay, well, just tell me, just talk to me and tell me. And he said, no, Mom, I need to know I can trust you. You don't understand. I've done something really awful. I've done something really, really bad. And I said, Donovan, you couldn't have done anything any worse than what you've done already. It's going to be okay. Just, spit it out. It's okay. I'm here. I love you. I'm not going to judge you. It's okay. Just talk to me and tell me. And that's when he said, I stabbed Allie 15 times. I killed her. And I said, so I took pause. Now, just hearing that with his voice, I didn't respond. I actually put myself on mute, and my body just starts vibrating at the table. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to keep him on the phone? How can I call this? How can I record this? All these things are going through my mind, and I couldn't do anything. I unmuted him and I said, Donovan, are you sure? He said, yeah, her body is in a fetal position on the bed and there's blood everywhere. I blacked out. I don't remember a lot of it. And I need to carry, she's telling me I need to carry her and take her and bathe her. And I said, Donovan, don't touch her body, please. Please don't touch her body.
That blackout, I've heard that from a number of schizophrenics who did something bad. It wasn't them who did it. They didn't even remember doing it. Whatever was in there took over, just like you were saying. He blacked out and he didn't remember doing it.
And he said when he woke up, he saw blood everywhere. And so I'm of, oh my God, don't touch her body. I said, call the police, Donovan, no matter what happened, if it was self-defense, whatever, just call the police, leave her body alone. Please, 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 please. I'm begging you. Please do not do anything. Don't do anything. Just call the police. It's going to be okay. I'll call some lawyers. I'll get some help. I'll figure it out. We'll do this together. I'll help you through this. I said, I don't know what happened. And I said, are you sure? He said, yes. And then the next thing out of his mouth was, she's really swollen. She's gotten really big. She's really swollen. She's bigger than what she is. And she's telling me I need to bathe her. And while he and I were on the phone together, he picked her up from the bed and carried her into the bathroom, and he started to bathe her. And then he hung up on me, and I never heard from him after that. Wait a minute, he might have called me that late that night, but I was in a funk. I don't remember anything he said to me, but I think he had a friend over, something came over. And I thought to myself, how can anybody come over and not even know that there's a dead body in that house? How is he keeping this a secret with all the blood he told me that was there? The one thing I did ask him, I said, Donovan, how many days has she been dead? And he said, 3. Now do the math, 27, 26, 25, 24, 23. Okay, so the 27th he told me. The 26th is when I was hiking. So she was dead already on the 26th. He didn't tell me till the 27th. So to 26, 25, that's a full day. 25 to 24 is a full day. That was his birthday. 24 to 23 is 3 days. It's not 4 days, it's 3. And I firmly believe, even though the police said that it appears that she was murdered on the 25th, I've had forensic astrologers do her charts. I have had 2 forensic astrologers do her charts. It is 100% based on the chart drawings of these forensic astrologers, prominent forensic astrologers, one in Australia and one in Wyoming. She was murdered around 10:37 p.m. on the 23rd, based on the astrology. And when I used all of the necessary information I could, and I'm telling you, I knew something was wrong then. And I'm not saying, and here's the other thing. The hard part about all of this is that the police did not believe me. I called the police. I begged them. Even when they came to my house when Donovan showed up on June 5th, the sheriff didn't even believe me. I said, I believe and have reason to believe there's body parts in his car. I believe it because I knew what he told me. And one of the other things he said to me in the phone call was, I'm about ready to do something I never thought I was capable of doing.
You said he killed her April 23rd.
I believe so.
But you just mentioned June 5th. What do you mean by June 5th?
He was evicted from that apartment for not paying rent. COVID is now All the apartments are having to move everybody out.
So this was after he killed her, June 5th, you mean?
Yes.
He was still
Yes.
at large, so to speak?
He was in the apartment with her body from that whole time.
For like over a month then? April, May?
Yeah, 43 days.
Oh, crazy.
Yes.
So Janine,
Yes.
I have, from time to time, I have mothers just like you that contact me saying, my son is getting violent with me. He's hearing voices. You know, what should I do? And they kind of, you know, they just don't believe that things can get out of control. You know, that they might have thrown things, broke things, smashed stuff, made threats, and they still kind of, you know, like they don't take it seriously. You know, and this is repeatedly. You know, and I warned them. I said, you know, be careful, be careful. What would you say to those mothers who have schizophrenic sons or daughters who are starting to get violent, and they just they go, well, that's just my son or daughter. I need to love them and take care of them, and you know, they'll get over it. Well, what words of advice would you have to those people who have schizophrenic relatives that are threatening them?
Well, first of all, the voices are real. The medicines don't work. Has your child been officially diagnosed with schizophrenia? What makes you feel that they have it? And they always, you know, admit that there's something going on. But the big thing is, first of all, most moms, like myself, saved face. We were embarrassed to talk about it with family. We were embarrassed. We swept it under the rug. And my question always is, how are you dealing with the fact that your child has schizophrenia, especially the ones that have had violent attacks from their children, thinking it will go away? And it doesn't go away, and it won't go away. It will only progressively get worse. And I do tell them, you have to understand, and this is what I would say, it's not going to go away. It's only going to progressively get worse. And the more that if your child is doing drugs, whatever drug it is, whether it's, you know, marijuana, or whether it's drinking, or whether it's meth, and usually meth is involved in most of the cases I've spoken with moms about, there are drugs that are involved, and you have to understand that opens up the portal to the entities to come in, to the soul.
Especially meth.
Exactly. It's the worst thing. And when that portal is open, you know, the attachments or attachment that's there, the dark entity that's there is not, it just feeds off of it, because it feeds. It's like it sucks all the energy out of the human body completely, but it transforms the human. It transforms the person, and that person isn't even the same person. And the moms that I've spoken with have said to me, but he's such a good kid. He would never do this on. Of course he would never do this on his own. Of course he would not. It's not him you're dealing with. You're dealing with an entity that has attached itself, that is demonic in sense, in truth. And you have to understand, you're not dealing, and you're not dealing with the child that you gave birth to. You're not dealing with the one that you love. And then the conversation comes up, Jerry, and you know this as well as I do. What ends up happening is the conversation comes up, well, there's no schizophrenia in our family. It's not freaking genetic. People think, I've been accused that you must have, you know, schizophrenia, and there's no diagnosis of schizophrenia on his biological father's side or my family side. Okay. And I'm adopted, and trust me, I've looked it up. I've had plenty of time to go into research and all of this over the course of time. We do not have any diagnosed. Donovan in the bloodline is the only child that's had and been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And so when these moms say this, it's like, you know, is this my fault? Of course, we're all going to go through, especially I did. This is my first speaking event in 10 months, because I have been fighting demons myself with just the overall discussion about this. It is a battle of good and evil when you're dealing with a kid that's got schizophrenia, you're going to get attacked. And I had to take a sabbatical to work through and build the, the pyramid around myself of strength to be able to come back on the speaking circuit to talk about this, because it still needs to be talked about. And I'm grateful to be here for that reason. And I need all moms to understand, it's not your fault. It's not anybody's fault. This is just something that happens. We don't know where these entities come from. I believe for my son Donovan, from my situation, I believe that when he was abused by this man I had a relationship with, the sexual abuse, he went into a dissociation, and that's when an entity crept in, because he removed himself from the situation because it was a very painful situation. Okay.
Yeah, abuse is there's a one-to-one correlation between schizophrenia and abuse. And the prisoners called meth the devil's drug, and they know, meth opens people up to being infested by these negative entities like no other drug out there.
It's awful. It's the worst thing out there. It's the most horrible. Oh, it's just awful. And our streets are filled with it. And it's not just meth. The fentanyl is in Arizona and Tucson, because we're so close to the border of Mexico. Oh my God. It's like night and day. And the fentanyl is equally just as horribly ugly of evil, and creates all of the zombies, if you will, and no different than the meth does. And it's just awful what meth does to people. And I'm living proof as a mom, having a son and living with all of this horribleness that Donovan did. And also blaming myself, wondering, was I a good enough mom? Was I this? Was I that? And, thank you, Jerry. And thank you, Sherry. And thank you, everyone, for being so supportive and, embracing me and letting me know. But just because you tell me it's not my fault doesn't mean I don't have those feelings of what could I have done differently as a mom. I was a young mother. I look back and I know that I did my best. I know that I did my best with him. I know that for a fact. He made his own choices. But what happened to him as a young child, that should have never happened to him.
Yeah.
And there was nothing I could have ever done to prevent it, but it happened. And that's when I believe that he became possessed. And with those 3 little friends he had, I think it started there. And then they left, and then whatever came into him came back. Now,
why did you leave the man that abused him?
Because he abused me. Oh, he beat me up.
At the same time.
I was 18 years old. Oh my God. He was a 33-year-old man.
How old?
I had no business being 33, and I was like 18 years old. I had no business being with him, but I thought, white picket fence, a man that liked me. He showed me some affection. He liked my son. That's being naive. If I could go back and change that, I don't have any regrets about my life. But naivete is not an excuse. But when you're young and this is in the 70s, life was a whole lot different back in the 70s than it is today. I certainly would never make that decision today. But being a young mom and knowing his dad was never going to be part of his life, and struggling, to go to college then, and struggling to feed him and keep a job because I had to find daycare and all that, that's a life so far gone and removed. But, I had to do what I had to do to put food on the table and keep a roof over our heads. And that's not an excuse, but, I did the best I could as a mom, being 16 years old on up. What do you do? What do you do? Hindsight being 2020. And so I do know, I know that the choices and decisions I made not always were the best choices and decisions, hindsight being 2020, but I did what I had to do because I was in survival mode, and when we get in that place, oftentimes we don't make good choices. We don't, that's Janine, the truth.
Janine, sure. you want to say something about the group that you started?
Oh, thank you. So, after Jerry and Sherry and I were talking about it, we decided that it would be a really good idea because at that particular time, I noticed when I started following Jerry and had been following him for a while, that he didn't have any interviews with moms, and so I chased him down.
She did.
and, and I did, and I found him, and I think it took you back a little bit. I know it
Yeah,
did.
yeah, it did.
And then Jerry and I had a very long conversation one evening, and it was on 88 Lionsgate, and we talked for a long time, and then we got to know each other, and then we decided that we would like to work with each other, and so we started a Facebook group, and it's a Facebook group called Moms and Family Members that have schizophrenia. And we have the link, and we would be glad to give that to you to put in wherever you want to put it, Lorenzo, whatever works for you.
Yeah,
and so that
share it
people
along.
could,
Yeah, for sure.
And we have a web form that you can fill out to receive a free document. It's called the Fear is the Path to the Dark Side. And it's about let me see how many pages. It's a 16-page document of all of the different presence of other worlds, all of the different destructive patterns, and of what to look for if your child has schizophrenia. And the one thing I can say, if we're wrapping this up, is that don't deny yourself the truth. Don't save your face for something that can gradually become a problem. Don't sweep it under the rug. This is a real situation, and if the person is on medication and they get off of it and they progressively get worse, that means that entity is really taking over their lives. And as from a mom perspective, you really need to remove yourself from that situation. And that can be hard sometimes for moms to do, because we all love our children. If you're going to preserve your own life and your own integrity and your own self, your body, your psyche, everything about you, you have to separate, because there's no filters, there's no boundary lines. The worse the schizophrenia gets, the worse the voices get, that person is going to attack you in your spiritual side, your physical side, your mental side, everything about you as the mom, because they are the closest. You are, as a mom, you are the closest thing to that person, and that entity knows how to get into you to manipulate you, and which is what they're so good at doing. And they can be soft 1 minute and flip that quick.
Yep. And they want to break the schizophrenic off from the family. They want him isolated, away from the mom, away from the dad, just sitting in their room alone, listening to the voices all day. They want to destroy any relationship that they have with anybody, and just keep them for themselves. Do you have any final questions, Lorenzo?
Yeah. Did you ever become a psychologist, Janine? You were in school for that.
I did not. I was 22 credits short of graduating because my husband got Lou Gehrig's disease. And when we were married, and subsequently Lou Gehrig's disease took him, and I miss him terribly to this day. He was my last marriage, and I loved him so much, and it was such a tragedy. It was such a loss. And so, that was that. That was part of my life. And actually, I did find the poem that Donovan wrote when he was in prison about Ray. Would you like me to read that poem?
Yeah.
Okay.
Read that.
Give me just a second.
We can finish up with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. Let me get that. Because I was able to find it.
I think that's the monster poem, isn't it?
No, this is not the monster poem. This is a poem that Donovan wrote while he was in prison after Ray had passed away. And he wrote it on September 18th of 2005. Now, bear with me. I've got to get a magnifying glass, because these are all of Donovan's original poems. And when I scan these, it's in pencil, and I'm going to need to get my magnifying glass to read this. So give me a second here.
Yeah, he wrote a series of poems, and
Yeah, I
they're
have over
spooky.
100
Oh.
poems. Yeah, they're very
Oh.
scary. They're
What
very,
does this one have a title?
yes, it's called A Moment to Remember. And it was poem number 43, written September 18th of 2005. And it was Raymond, I won't say his last name, Raymond, and his date of death was 11/24 of 2000. He died the day after Thanksgiving. And so this is the poem he wrote about Ray. There have been moments that I've tried to recall. Some were blurry, some were sane, but most of them I can see after all. I dive into the mess I call my mind and search for good times. Throughout my struggles, I find that I've spent a good many days hoping and listening on positive avenues to fall upon me. But as I dwell on a moment to remember, I wonder what I have been missing. Clouded by the thoughts I see, I focus on the bad and mull it over in my brain. I don't want to, but it seems those are the only ones to be I think the word is hope, and please bear with me because it's a copy of a pencil, and it's those things that drive me insane. Rapid breathing, fog rolls in, and then it starts to rain, trying to grasp moments that were good but few, like times I've wished upon a monster, wishing away the bad, wanting good to my life, to bring, sometimes hoping in vain, searching for a higher meaning for me to find within. But then it starts again, hampering my gain as I fall into step behind my memory, trying to find a moment to remember. I search my mind in depth, taking in all of the scenery, and suddenly my mind finds a day of thanks in November. I probe it gingerly. Trying to find a smile inside and quickly dismiss it, because that was the day that he died. He loved Ray. And that poem, when I picked it up the first time I read it, I didn't realize how much he really cared for Ray, and he's in prison, keep in mind, when he wrote that.
Mm.
And but you can, he's in prison and that monster is still living within him. It's taking away and doesn't even want him to remember family. It doesn't even want him to remember good times. I mean, that's so obvious when I read this poem. Schizophrenia is real. It is not a disease. There is no amount of medication that anybody, any pharmaceutical company or doctor can prescribe The voices are real.
It's a spiritual battle.
It is a spiritual battle. It's a battle of good and evil. And as family members, the best thing that we can do is love our children, love them. Don't allow the anger to ever surface because that entity has won. And save yourself before you do anything if they get really violent, if the person with schizophrenia gets really violent, because you will get hurt. And I had the wherewithal and the common sense to know that early on when Donovan turned 17, and it carried through with me to this very day. And I know that for a fact when he came back in June, that I wouldn't be here if I would have went out to that gate that day. I would be gone. And that's the truth.
Yeah. So if it seems not to be your son or daughter and they have schizophrenia, that's because it's not your son or daughter that is doing or saying those things.
Yep. That's a true statement. Indeed.
Janine, I would love to delve deeper into this with you, perhaps in another conversation. It seems you've met a whole bunch of other mothers, so to speak, who have had similar experiences. And, maybe we can elucidate some of the challenges and solutions that might help others, down the road. I'd be delighted to pick this up as you're feeling ready and able and willing.
Good.
Thank you so much. And it's been an honor, and thank you. I knew that I needed to get back up on my feet and embark upon this journey. I'm so much stronger now than I was 10 months ago. I had to go through my own journey of healing. Still, it's a continuous battle of, to heal from this. Like I said, this is the anniversary month. But the interesting thing about today, which I find intriguing, is today is the new moon. Today is also the eclipse. And this is a very difficult eclipse. And it can be seen in Asia and I believe Australia. And it's not really quite here. But if you haven't done any research on it, it's really something to be understood. So this day is a very special day, which happens with Jerry and I. We have that synchronicity. It's really funny about the way that we end up doing our interviews. But I want you to know that this day and meeting you, Lorenzo, is a very special day. And I'm so grateful to be here. And thank you so much for entertaining the idea of having us. Obviously, Jerry before, but me as well. I do appreciate it because I have a question for you, if you don't mind, in closing. How in Japan, what is the ratio, or do you even know of people with schizophrenia in your culture?
No idea. I mean, it's not my culture, right? My wife's Japanese, but
Gotcha.
I would say in talking to people, just about everybody in varying degrees these days, especially after the viral shenanigans over the last few years. I think these monsters bother everyone to varying degrees. Jerry and I have talked to this before.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's more prominent than because they're being pushed out by the light. And I do have to say that's true.
I mean, it depends, right? My mother-in-law is bedridden, and I think the monster, she just attacks herself, right? So some people do it inwardly, and some people do it out.
That's the truth.
My mother as well. My mother's had her psychotic breaks, and she's lost her mind. So I've kind of lived with it on both sides of the ocean. And so I would say it's very prevalent because you try talking to them. And I mentioned this, Jerry, before you came on, and they'll be talking to you, and then suddenly there'll be a switch. I'm tired right now. I'm tired right now. Get out of the room. Like I'll be talking with my mother-in-law, trying to help her, saying, do this for yourself, go outside, get some light, eat better, whatever, be more loving with your husband, whatever. And then suddenly click, you have to go now. I'm tired. Yeah. You have to go now. I'm tired. And I'm going, there's just nobody there anymore. Just like a shutter comes down over their eyes. So I would say it's very prevalent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
my goodness.
They want no interference.
Yeah, no loving. It's like, don't be loving with me anymore. Yep. Get out of here.
They want no interference.
Yeah. And that's the truth. Family members, including my son, they will push you away, but that's not them because they crave love. But the entity that lives within them they don't want anything to do with you. And you know, and we all do that. So yes, I look forward to that time that we can spend time together
Yeah, I
again.
would love
Thank
to shake it out some more, so to speak. I have a whole bunch of other questions, but you know, we've gone a long time in this one, so I think this has been a great one. So, Janine, thank you so much for joining us. Please send me those links. Jerry
Okay.
as well. I'll put,
Yeah.
you know,
I'll let Jerry handle that because my computer is acting
okay.
up, but I'll get Jerry the links in an
Okay,
email.
okay, send me the links and I'll send them. And please send me that that paper you had that you were showing with the fear.
Yes.
That you said the symptoms of fear. You were showing it just a little while ago.
You're not talking to me. You're talking to Janine.
No, I'm talking to Janine.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yes. Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So get me all that. I can put it into an article. If you have anything you feel like sharing, Janine, with Jerry or me over the next couple of days before I make the video live, please do so. You know,
Okay.
I'll put it all together, and Jerry, of course, you'll share it afterwards, and I'll send you the links and the thumb I'm going to use if you want to use the same one or not. You know, up to you, whatever you feel like sharing. And either way, I appreciate both of you very much. Thank you so much for being here, Janine. Jerry, is there anything you'd like to leave our viewers with on the way out?
Nope. Think about this.
Yeah,
Think about this. This is a spiritual battle, and right now it's becoming very intense because it's happening
Yes.
all over the planet right now.
Mhm.
The mainstream media, they're broadcasting the same things that the psychotic voices are telling schizophrenics. There's
It's
a
true.
one-to-one
Mhm.
correspondence between what the voices tell schizophrenics and what the mainstream media is broadcasting to us 24 hours a day right now.
It's
This
very,
is a spiritual battle going on all over the planet.
it's very true.
Yes.
I would see that as well. So, you know, pick up your bootstraps, figure out what's going on, become strong inside. And there's always ways you can help yourself. If you decide, Janine, you look very strong. So whatever you've gone through over the last 10 months seems to have worked. So I appreciate you
Yes.
sharing,
Thank you.
know, and getting it out, and beautiful smile. And Jerry, thank you so much. I'll see you both again probably soon. And thank you for being here, everyone. Please like and subscribe. If anyone has any questions or suggestions, further chats for me and Janine, me and Jerry, or anything else, you know, I'm happy to entertain all intelligent responses. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Jerry.
You bet.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Bye-bye.
Can't make me lie, lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what I say. Nothing now gonna get in my way.